All right, today we're tackling a big one. We're going to unpack this powerful authenticity test, a kind of guide for telling the difference between real faith and, well, the imitation kind. This is all coming from a really foundational text, so let's just dive right in. You know, we ask this question all the time, right? How do you spot a fake, whether it's a designer handbag or a piece of art? In a world that's just full of knockoffs, how can you tell what's the real deal? And what if we're talking about something where the stakes are way, way higher than just money? So the source material we're looking at today actually kicks off with this perfect analogy. It brings up a Korean TV show called Authentic Masterpieces. And on this show, you've got these experts, right? Their whole job is to figure out if an item is a priceless original or just a really, really convincing fake. It's such a great way to think about it, because for pretty much every real thing out there, there's a ton of imitations designed to fool you. And that really brings us right to the heart of what we're talking about today. I mean, if it's that tricky with physical stuff, how on earth do you apply an authenticity test to something as deep and personal as faith? We've all heard the stories, right? People who look super devout on the outside, but behind closed doors, it's a completely different story. So, what does this text say? What are the real signs to look for? Okay, so the very first test, it doesn't actually start with what a person does. It starts with a choice, a really fundamental choice that everyone has to make. The text pictures it as choosing between two gates, and each one leads down a totally different path.
So, on one side, you've got the wide gate. This one's easy. It looks good. It's the popular choice, the one most people take. But, and this is a big but, the text warns that it leads to destruction. Then, you've got the other option, the narrow gate. And this one, well, it's tough. It's a path of suffering, and not many people even find it, let alone choose it. But this is the path that leads to life.
But here's what's so important to understand about what this difficult path really means. It's not about making yourself miserable or some kind of extreme physical challenge. No, the text describes it as a total transfer of power. It's about giving up your kingdom, your values, your will, to live for God's kingdom instead. It really just boils down to one thing. Who's in charge?
All right, so if test number 1 is all about the path you choose, then test number 2 is about the evidence that comes from that choice. And the text has a specific name for this evidence. It calls it fruits.
Now, why is this second test so critical? Well, according to the source, it's because there are false prophets out there. And these are people who look the part, you know? They come in sheep's clothing, but on the inside, they're described as ravenous wolves. They're destructive. They're really good at saying things people want to hear, dressing up their own ideas to sound like divine wisdom. But the real goal? It's to lead you right back to that easy, wide path.
So how do you spot them? How do you see through the disguise? The text gives us one simple, incredibly powerful standard. You don't look at their words. You don't look at their charisma. You look at their fruits. That's the ultimate test. Okay, but what does that even mean, fruits? The source is super clear about this. Fruits are the real, practical actions of a person's life. It's not about what they say they believe. It's not just about their doctrinal checklist. It's about how they actually live their life day in and day out. As the text puts it, what you say with your lips has to be backed up by your actions. And this is exactly why actions are such a good test. I mean, think about it. Talk is cheap, right? Anybody can say anything. You can even fake religious-looking actions for a little while. But over the long haul, the consistent pattern of your life, your fruits, that's what's going to reveal who you really are. It always comes out in the end.
This leads us to the third test, and honestly, this one might be the most surprising of all. It takes this whole idea of fruits and pushes it even further, to the point where it questions even the most amazing, impressive religious acts you can imagine.
So the text describes this scene, a future judgment, and you have people standing up, basically listing off their spiritual resumes. And it's impressive stuff. They're saying, hey, we prophesied in your name. We cast out demons. We did all these incredible miracles. I mean, these are not small things, right? These are powerful, what you think are undeniable acts of faith. And the response they get, it's chilling. Absolutely chilling. The text says, Jesus will look at them and say, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. And you just have to ask, how is that possible? Well, the source explains that even these huge miraculous things can be totally disconnected from a real relationship with God. And even more importantly, disconnected from simple obedience to what he wants. So here's the bottom line, the big takeaway. The ultimate standard isn't how powerful or impressive your actions look. It's about whether those actions line up with the Father's will. The source really hammers this home.
It's not about doing big things or many things. It's about doing the right things, the things that are actually in line with God's will.
And to wrap all of this up, the text gives us this one final, really clear and memorable metaphor. It's the story of two builders, and each one builds a house.
You've got the first builder. He hears the words, but that's it. He doesn't do anything with them. That's like building your house on sand. Then you have the second builder. He hears the very same words, but he puts them into practice. That's like building on solid rock. So when the storms roll in, and the text says these storms are like life struggles or even the final judgment, the house on the sand just gets wiped out. Total collapse. But the house on the rock, it stands firm. It's a really simple logic here, kind of like 3 steps. Step 1, just hearing the words, going to church, reading, listening to talks, that's not enough. That's the sand. Step 2, it's the acting on the words, the obedience. That actually creates the foundation. And step 3, that foundation, the one built on both listening and doing, that's the rock that's going to keep you stable when things get rough.
So really, it all boils down to this one simple idea. According to this text, you can have 2 people sitting side by side, hearing the exact same message. But it's what they do next, their response, that changes everything. Do they just hear it, or do they hear it and then act on it? That single difference determines everything, not just their reality now, but their ultimate fate.
And that leaves us with one last big question, a question that really turns this whole thing back on us. After hearing all of this, the text is basically asking you personally, what foundation are you building on? Is it sand or is it rock?